So how much does RAM actually affect the performance of your PC? So we have taken a budget laptop and limited its RAM. Let's see how well it performs. So for this video I decided to test something that I'd seen elsewhere and I was pretty sure it did have an effect. Was how much does RAM affect the way a computer performs? So all this testing was done on my personal laptop, which is an Aspire ES15. So it has an AMD A4 5000 with Radeon HD 8330 graphics. This is an iGPU, so it does share system memory. So this may be the cause of some of the variation in results, as at lower amounts of memory it will be restricted as well as the main system. So all limiting was done through Windows. So you can see there is a method within Windows where you can, using boot options, limit the amount of RAM. So for this we used 2 GB, 4 GB, and the actual RAM my laptop had 8 GB. So the RAM is DDR3 1300 MHz, which obviously means it is not the latest spec, so with DDR4 this may be different. Benchmarks we used were 3DMark, Blender, we did the BMW render test, and we used the Unigine Heaven and Superposition and Valley benchmarks. So obviously there was some run-to-run variation. With 3DMark you can see here that with 2 GB in the Skydiver benchmark we got 940 points. With 4 GB it was 1302, and with 8 GB it was 1312. So you can obviously tell that this was only limited up to 4 GB of RAM. After that it was really just run-to-run variation. This was 1% variation. That's really not much at all. Now with Blender you can see all the render times up here. So due to the low spec of my laptop, they all were in the region of several hours, and it just appeared to be, to me, run-to-run variation. So Blender renders, at least in terms of this one, do not appear to be bound by RAM. They appear to be bound by something else. I did look this up, and it turns out that RAM only limits how big the scene you can render is. So obviously the BMW test was not big enough to get a did not run in this case. So as you can see here in the Unigine Superposition benchmark, our scores as we increased the RAM actually decreased. We didn't run repeat tests due to time constraints trying to get this video out last week, but the 4 GB and 8 GB only had what I can perceive to be run-to-run variation, 3 points. But from 2 GB going up to 4 GB of RAM, this actually dropped over 50 points in the benchmark. Now in the Valley benchmark we had a similar story, except 2 GB and 4 GB were run-to-run variation, and then there was a large drop again of around about 50 points again as we went up to 4 GB from 4 to 8 GB. This is kind of strange, but as I said, we did not have the time to rerun benchmarks, as this is time consuming because it requires a restart between each run to change the RAM limit. In Heaven we scored the same 2 gigabytes and 4 gigabytes and dropped a few less points. We only dropped 22 on this one. However, this is still a large difference when you only have 162 points to start off with. So in conclusion, this is not an issue on a lower end system such as ours, even using integrated graphics. The only anomaly that stands out obviously is 3D Mark, but this may just be due to the size of the scenes and the fact that the iGPU was suffering due to the fact that it only had 2 gigabytes total RAM to play with. So obviously the Unigine benchmarks may have used smaller assets or something, and the Blender was obviously, because it ran, there were no issues and no changes. So when you are going for RAM, go for the recommended specs of your games that you wish to play. Don't take advice just from us, because we are using a pretty bad system that on average actually only got, even at maximum, 5.6 FPS in the Unigine Heaven benchmark, and this is at 720p low. So it's not exactly performing very well. You may get issues with higher end systems, and when you start getting up to the games with larger assets, such as say playing City Skylines on my laptop, if I half the amount of RAM in it, from 4 gigabytes to 8 gigabytes, I would go from getting less than 10 FPS in my large city at the lowest quality settings, and using a mod to reduce the resolution further, I would actually go to the point of being unable to run the game due to the lack of RAM. So thank you for watching, and if you liked this video, hit that button. If you disliked it, obviously you're going to know where that button is, and subscribing would really help us out.